Good evening, members and officers, and welcome to this meeting of the Governance and Audit Scrutiny Committee. My name is Councillor Justin Wrench, and I will be chairing this meeting. Members, before we begin, can I remind you that this meeting is being broadcast live via the Council's YouTube channel. As we move through the meeting, please can I remind everyone present to turn off their microphones when they have finished speaking. I shall now proceed with the business of the meeting. So agenda item 1, apologies for absence. Apologies for the meeting have been received from Councillors Hume and Walsh. Do we have any other apologies?
Not aware of any other apologies, Chairman.
Thank you. I will now proceed to item 2, declarations of interest. Do members have any disclosable pecuniary interest, other pecuniary interest or non-pecuniary interest that they wish to declare this evening? Please state the item and the nature of your interest. No, as there are no declarations, I will proceed to item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. Please can I have a proposer to approve the minutes as an accurate record of the meetings from the Governance and Audit Scrutiny Committee on the 13th of January 2022. Thank you, Councillor Eusden. I now seek a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Mann. The minutes have been moved and seconded as an accurate record. All those in favour, please indicate by show of hands. Councillor Johnson? Yeah. No, that's fine. So, no, thank you. So the minutes have been approved. I will just sign those. So agenda item 4, public question time. Members, I can confirm that there are no registered speakers for this evening's meeting. We will now proceed with agenda item 5, external audit update, and we are very grateful to have Steve Bladden with us today, who is a BDO external auditor. So I will now hand over to Steve to present his report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a verbal update from us this evening, and really just to update you on the progress of both the 2019-20 audit and the 2020-21 audit, both of which are still in progress. So if I start with the 2019-20 audit, so members who have been on this committee for some time will no doubt remember that I think it was back in October we brought to you an audit completion report that set out our findings on the 2019-20 audit, the errors that we had identified and which had been corrected. And essentially that paper set out that that audit was substantially complete. There's been no change to that. There's nothing further to report to you in relation to the 2019-20 audit. However, subsequent to that meeting in October, an issue has arisen nationally in relation to infrastructure assets. If I just give a bit of background to what that issue is. So sometime around the end of last year, the beginning of this year, another firm received a significant sanction from a regulator, so a financial penalty, in relation to the work that they had done on infrastructure assets at another council. And essentially that what they hadn't done, or what they were deemed not to have done, was determine where there had been additions to infrastructure assets, whether the council had taken sufficient steps to de-recognise any existing assets that related to that addition. So if you buy something new that's replacing an existing asset, has work been done to de-recognise the existing asset? So that's essentially the issue, and I think it's complicated by the fact that many councils with infrastructure assets will simply just add to the balance year on year, and quite often there's very little work done to determine whether anything should be de-recognised in relation to those additions. As a result of that issue being identified, SIPFA, who writes the Code of Audit Practice or the Code of Practice, I should say, that councils follow in preparing their financial statements, they have set up a task and finish group to see whether or not there is anything that they can do to help overcome this issue around infrastructure assets. And one of the options open to SIPFA, or that SIPFA are likely to consult on, is whether the code provisions in relation to infrastructure assets should be de-applied, so they don't apply to audits going forward for a period of time. Until that piece of work is complete, I think it's very unlikely that councils that have significant infrastructure assets will receive an audit opinion, because the risk to auditors of issuing an audit opinion while that consultation or that piece of work is ongoing are too great. And I think my understanding is that the current timescales, it's likely to be June until that work is complete. So, as I say, I don't think you will see many authorities with significant infrastructure assets being issued an audit opinion until that work is complete. And I say that's a national issue, that's not just a Braintree issue. What we think we can do in relation to our audit of Braintree is we think that there's been very little instances of additions taking place in recent years that could potentially be replacing existing assets. But until we undertake a piece of work that addresses that risk, we're unable to issue an audit opinion. So what we are looking to do is just do that work with Phil and his team over the next few weeks, so that we can hopefully get to a position where we can issue an audit opinion without waiting until late June, early July for any solution offered by the SIPFA Task and Finish Group. So that's kind of the hold up with the 1920 audit, but it also impacts on our ability to issue an audit opinion in relation to 2021. So if I just pick up where we are in relation to that 2021 audit, the work has been progressing, and we think we're around 85% complete on that work now. So unfortunately, we weren't able to bring an audit completion report on 2021 to this committee, but what we are looking to do, and are hopeful that we will be able to do, is bring that to your next committee on I think it's around about late July, we'll say late July. We expect to be able to bring an audit completion report to that committee. There's no, in terms of when I say there's 85% of the work complete, that's accurate. That's where we're up to, and certainly at this stage, nothing significant has come out of the work that we've completed to date that we would need to bring your attention to. But as I say, we will look to complete that work as we go forward throughout May and June. I'll pause there and obviously take any questions that members might have.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Do members have any questions for Steve on his reports? Councillor Mann.
On this matter of derecognition, does it mean that, in fact, infrastructure assets may be overvalued? Is that the problem? So you've inflated the value of assets, and so you knock out what's gone before and just take the value of what is now being added.
I think that's exactly it. Yes, yeah. So if you replace something, then what you should do is you should knock out the value of what's already included in the fixed asset register. It's important to recognise that some of those assets may have been depreciated as well, so you would knock out the accumulated depreciation on those as well.
Thank you.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Forgive my ignorance, but who or what decides what is an asset? What's the qualification of an infrastructure asset? I mean, one thing is, one thing isn't. You know, is there a dividing line? How do you determine it?
So the code of, I would call it the code of accounting practice that SIPFA prepare goes into quite a lot of detail about how assets should be classified. So there's probably 6 or 7 different categories of assets, and the code provisions set out the description of what each type of asset is. Then it's obviously a little bit of judgment as to which one it's allocated to, but they're fairly clear cut actually in terms of what they can be allocated to. Just as an example, infrastructure assets would tend the biggest ones are obviously road networks, which tend to be held by county councils or London boroughs, for example, or metropolitan boroughs. The ones that district councils tend to hold tend to be sometimes unadopted roads, so roads that haven't been adopted by the county, cycle networks, parks, that kind of thing. If I may, I should just say the value of infrastructure assets in Braintree District Council is material as well to I mean, we set a materiality level of about 1.3 million, and the infrastructure assets that Braintree holds on its balance sheet is quite a way in excess of that, which is why we need to do the piece of work before we can issue the audit opinion.
Okay, thank you, Steve. I think it's fair to say on behalf of this committee that we really do hope that we can sign off those audit reports at our next meeting. So, but we really appreciate you coming to our meeting today. And I believe that national issue being brought to the attention of us has been helpful in recognising where we stand with the report. So, no, thank you for coming today. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I will now move to agenda item 5, the key financial indicators, agenda item 6, the key financial indicators as of the 28th of February 2022. This report is set out on pages 5 to 10 of your agenda and will be presented by Phil Myers, Head of Finance. So I will now ask Phil to present his report. Thank you, Phil.
Yes, sure, and good evening, members. So this report is sort of standard for this committee, so it's covering off, as said, it's a suite of financial indicators that the committee has asked to sort of monitor on a regular basis, and these are as at the end of February. So they cover various areas of the council's budget spend, and some of its activities around tax collection and treasury management. So just picking out some of the points that are in the report in terms of our revenue spend at the end of February against what we would have anticipated. We've had a positive variance of £980,000. The majority of that is tied up with income, as is typical as we've seen in previous years. Income can be quite volatile for us. This year, particularly so around the recycling material collected, where the price per tonne has rocketed basically over the course of the year, and that's probably one of the factors that is being driven by some of the oil prices. So whilst we're getting pressures on our budgets in one way in terms of some of our costs, this is one of the sort of, I suppose, positive aspects of that is helping mitigate some of that. We continue to provide an assessment to government about the impact on COVID, so we still provide the monthly updates there, and that is showing, as previously reported, that we continue to incur additional expenditure that relates to the pandemic, and we're also, despite having a positive variance on our budget, we are still seeing some areas where we have a downturn in our income. Much of that impact from COVID is actually being covered now through a multitude of funding. So we've received funds through the Leisure Recovery Fund. We've received some additional funding through government at the finance settlement, and we've made some claims for income losses as well up to the end of the period of June. But we also provisioned within our 21-22 budget. We also provisioned within that we anticipated a shortfall in our investment income, and therefore we were planning on drawing down on the Treasury Management Reserve in that year as well to mitigate the position. In terms of, so at the moment, as you'd expect, we are now in the process of preparing the outturn for the year, and that will come through to Cabinet at its meeting in July. Just drilling down a little bit into some of the expenditure, salaries being a key area of spend. Again, a positive variance at the end of February of 120,000, and that's after taking into account the fact that we anticipate having some underspend in our salaries, and at the end of February that would have been to the tune of 275,000 out of the 300,000 efficiency factor for the year. As you'd expect, much of that variance is really to do with vacant posts across the organisation. You'll be aware we've had quite a bit of organisational change and churn within the organisation as well, and that's created some savings in intervening periods. And we've also had some other efficiency savings that we've had in some areas where, for example, staff have taken on, been able to take on work where there's been some funding, and but that's been done within existing resource. In terms of commercial rents, this one might look a little bit funny in that we've invoiced to the end of February 3.5 million, but we're actually projecting that by the end of the year we'd just be overachieving the budget of 2.9 by 65,000. That's just recognising that we do bill for some of the rents quarterly in advance, so that they'll get adjusted as part of that year-end process. But we are anticipating to actually outperform the budget on commercial rents, and as you can see, the occupancy rate of our units remains very high at around 99%, so very positive there. In terms of the capital programme, as we know, we've got a very ambitious capital programme that we've been undertaking for a number of years. So the level of expenditure we've seen this year and in previous years has been much higher than in past years. So we've spent roughly around 80% at the end of February of the updated programme that we anticipated for the year, and much of that is due to the significant work that's been done in terms of the major projects that are listed in the report there. Conversely, on capital receipts, so we were anticipating £17.5 million of capital receipts, and again, those expected from a variety of sources. The actual amount to the end of February is 18.9 million, so which is pleasing. I have to say that some of that is a combination of timing differences. So whilst we anticipate capital receipts, there are all sorts of reasons why the actual receipt of that can be, the timing of that can change. So some of that is timing rather than necessarily additional amounts over and above what we might have been expecting over a number of years. But nevertheless, we have seen an upturn in some of our capital receipts, and particularly around the right to buy receipts that we received through Eastlight, where the amounts there are higher than we originally anticipated. In terms of council tax collection, so performance, just a little bit down against where we were at this period at the end of February the previous year, but nevertheless, still significantly higher than the Essex average. And I did check the March figures, and actually performance has now turned up again in March. So actually the position has reversed from March. So that's pleasing, but we're just slightly down from where we were this year. Business rates, though, on the other hand, is higher than we achieved last year. So that's pleasing to see that. I think for most of the year we had been showing that we were not collecting as much, but a lot of that issue was around the fact that we had to rebill a lot of accounts midway during the year with changes in discounts, COVID discounts that businesses were given. So we had to rebill a lot of businesses from July, and that sort of pushed payment plans out longer. So what we've seen now is at the tail end of the year that collection performance has now recovered. In terms of write-offs, so there's some information about write-offs for council tax and business rates, and as in previous years, the actual numbers and the value when you take an average is relatively low. In terms of the amounts we actually are collecting through council tax and business rates, we write off very little in terms of proportions. So, and that's continuing. In terms of sundry debts, we at the end of the period we have 2.6 million. Again, a large part of that is our housing benefit debt that we continue to collect, and a lot of that is being collected over a whole range of payment plans, and some of that is prescribed and restricted. So it is by its nature collected at small rates per year. There was a review of some of the historical debt, and that did lead to an increase in the number of and value of write-offs in the year, but that had been previously provisioned for as part of when we look at sort of debt as part of our year-end process. So those would just be offset against those provisions and would not be sort of impacting on our budget. The proportion of payments for suppliers, 96.4%. So this is an area that we are looking at in terms of reviewing what we consider as an appropriate target. We've got probably a very challenging and probably not achievable target now on that activity, particularly given some of the changes in services and working practices that have occurred over the last few years. So we are looking to revise that, but nevertheless, performance is still comparatively good when compared with others. And in terms of our short-term investments, again, not unsurprising, we didn't really generate much income from our short-term investments, with rates being very close to zero for much of the year. But we have seen some upturn in those rates, so we should see sort of higher levels of short-term investment income going forward in the current year. Where we do continue to still see value is in our long-term pooled funds. So dividend income has performed pretty well. So at the end of February, we achieved 641,000, which is a significant portion of the budget, and we're anticipating exceeding the budget on that source of income for the year. At the quarter three, that was a return of in excess of 4%. So it's a particularly valuable part of our investment portfolio there that we've had in place for many years. We did see a drop in the market values of those investments at the end of February, given the situation that arose in Europe. Nevertheless, we didn't see a fall in values to the same extent that we did when COVID first came onto the scene. So the actual funds still actually were showing a positive gain of 2.4 million, even though there had been a drop, and much of that, well, all of that, and actually it's actually improved since then. So at the end of March, the actual values were actually higher. So And then just make reference there to the fact that there is more detail around where we've got our money that was invested at the end of the period of, in the appendix, supporting appendix. So I think happy to take any questions on that, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Phil. Do members have any questions for Phil? Councillor Mann?
It's amazing. Recyclables, we were a couple of years ago fearing we're going to have to pay someone to take them away, and now they're providing a very, very useful income stream indeed. And, 99% occupancy rate, that's again sort of remarkable. Capital Street receipts quite strong, and sort of a non sort of realised gain of 2.4 million or so, so quite healthy. The write-off proportion is low and low historically. Are the actual number of cases sort of rising at this point in time? Because it seems a lot of individual cases, even though the sums written off are quite small. 859 write-offs authorised in the year to 28th of Feb. 225 in this year, and 634 over previous years. You don't detect a sort of an upward sort of surge.
No, well, I think that those, I think in terms of those numbers, and I think that show in the appendix that they are higher than previous years in terms of numbers. I think we were anticipating that in the wake of COVID that our collection performance and potential for write-offs would increase. So yes, you're right. The numbers have increased, but it's still, you say, in the context of the sums we are collecting, still relatively low. So.
Another one, if I may, Chairman, the supplier payments, if 30 days isn't sustainable, I agree with you. I mean, never going to get 100% on sort of 30 days. What might your recommendation be in the future after sort of review?
So so that sort of piece of work has just been done, and as part of sort of revisiting the targets as part of the bouncing back plan, we're proposing that that target should be 97%. So it's still above what we've achieved, but that there are circumstances we believe why the performance is slightly down from that currently. So we feel that target is. It's not. It's something to stretch or to aim for, but it's not unrealistic where we've got 99%. So yeah.
Thank you, Phil. Are there any other questions? Okay, as there are no remaining questions, we are asked to accept the reports of the key financial indicators. Can I take it that the report has been accepted? And please indicate this by a show of hands. Thank you. The report has been accepted. We will now proceed to agenda item 7, the progress against the Internal Audit Plan 2021-2022. The report is sent out on pages 11 to 28 of the agenda. So please can I invite Angie Mitchell, the Audit, Insurance and Fraud Manager, to set out the report.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so the public sector internal audit standards require that we report to this committee and to give an update on the progress of internal audit activity. The progress against the 2021 internal audit plan is detailed in Appendix page 18, from page 18. So that gives a summary of the audits completed and those in progress. I have some updates on that. Item number 3 on page 18, the manager's self-service review is substantially in progress, and we'll be reporting on that next time round. Item 12, the North Essex Economic Board Partnership is also substantially complete. Item 28, business resilience, and also note 2, that item was deferred but is now in progress. And item 34, IT inventory, is substantially complete, so they will be reported next time round. Paragraph 3.1.2 at the top of page 12 summarises the reports which have been completed since the last report to the Governance and Audit Scrutiny Committee. And from page 21 onwards gives further detail on those reports. Paragraph 3.1.3 summarises some work conducted by the team in respect of risk management arrangements. And 3.1.4 identifies the items impacting on the completion of internal audit work and audit time. Paragraph 3.2 summarises the progress against the External Quality Assessment Action Plan. So the External Quality Assessment, EQA, was conducted in 2017 and reported to this committee in 2018. And it was an external assessment against the public sector internal audit standards. It made a number of recommendations and suggestions and observations, and the progress in respect of those is detailed in 3.2.1. We also conduct a self-assessment against the public sector internal audit standards. 3.3.1 gives a summary of the areas of the standards against we're assessing, and 3.3.2 confirms that my assessment is that the Braintree District Council internal audit function on the whole conforms with the public sector internal audit standard requirements, and I draw attention in that paragraph to those areas where further action is planned. This report also provides members with an update on the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act and Investigatory Powers Act applications. There were no applications since the last report to this committee, and training in respect of RIPA and IPA has been provided to key officers. Chairman, that's a summary of the report, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Angie. Councillor Mann.
Well, thanks for the report. Very, very clear, very detailed as per usual. Page 12, you outline that you've got a really heavy workload, which we know anyway. Particularly in insurance, you say there's a lot of a high level of sort of claims. Is that claims on behalf of the council or claims against the council?
So the majority of claims that we receive are against the council.
What typically are they over? What sort of things do people claim against the council over?
Okay, so we have a number of different areas of claims. In terms of the volume, the public liability areas of claim are the highest at the moment, and slightly increasing. We also receive claims in respect of our vehicles, our fleet vehicles mostly, but those are reducing slightly. And we have a number of other areas of claims, such as employer liability. We don't get too many of those, and other minor areas.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned page 14, computer-assisted audit sort of techniques, CAATS, and we haven't sort of purchased the any software in this field sort of at the moment, and you suggest it's sort of under under review. Is it likely that we will?
So the field of data analytics and its use in internal auditing is increasing, and so I think there's more potential for its use, more scope, and so it is something we'd like to explore.
Yep. Okay. Just one more, if I may, Chair.
Yep.
I can read my notes and. Multitasking I can't do, so scrolling and reading at the same time almost impossible for me. I think it's on the project on sort of project, the realisation of benefits. That you did a sort of a limited scheme examining sort of 2023, I think it was, schemes. And you thought there were considerable lessons to be learned as a result of that survey. Now, presumably these, and you detail what steps might be taken to learn lessons from sort of projects for future projects, but all the major strategic investment sort of projects were excluded from that scheme. So I can't recall that you've reported to us previously any similar examination of larger schemes. Is that a possibility in the future? And if such an investigation did take place, do you think we'd only get limited assurance again on major projects?
Thank you. So this committee has received a report on the Manor Street development and some assurance.
We did that justice, I think, yeah.
Absolutely. And as a result of that review, a number of additional steps were taken by the council to make its processes in that respect more robust. So the committee's received that update in that. We are planning further work within that area. But I think it's fair to say that the focus and the effort put in to strategic investment projects is very different to these.
Thank you, Chair.
No, thank you. Councillor Euston.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Angie. I'm going to go back to the areas that Councillor Mann has just covered, but slightly differently, insofar that you reported to us on page 12 about the insurance work that you undertake, and that was similar to what was reported last meeting. So that makes me question, do we have sufficient resources for that? Or should we be looking at increasing resources in that area to lessen the workload that you're doing on that so that you can do more of the audit stuff, if that's an appropriate question? So that's my first one. There's a couple more, but you can go with that one first if you want.
Thank you. It's a fair point. Yes, it is fair to say that the majority of my time is spent dealing with insurance-related matters. What the committee will need to obviously consider is the nature of the work that's been reported, whether we're meeting our objectives, our requirements under the public sector internal audit standards. So we do report to you where we're not, where we're planning additional action and so on. So we need to keep you up to date with where we are. But yes, it is a significant draw on time.
Yeah, so is that a polite way of saying yes, you could do with more resource?
I think, that was quite a diplomatic way of putting that.
I thought so. Okay, so then the next part was also, Councillor Mann has raised it, the use of computer-aided audit techniques, and it says, I think, if I understand the terminology, that he decided not to do anything with that at the moment. Was that decision cost-related or benefit-related, or a bit of both?
So there are costs associated with the purchase of cats. There are various options available to us, but yes, it does involve both money to buy the systems and training and the resource input. It's not off the table. It is something that we would like to explore, and I think with the the greater use of technology, it would be very beneficial to us.
But you don't think we need it yet? Oh, am I putting words in your mouth again? Okay, leading the witness. So we'll move on from that. Just really a light one, my last one, if I may.
Yeah.
Is finally, after I don't know, a couple of years of this committee, I've got my head around the various different assurances and what each one means. And I know I pestered the life out of you for the first few meetings over what they meant. And you've thrown me a curveball now with a reasonable assurance, which is equivalent to BDC significant assurance, but from an alternative source. That's on page 22 for the North Essex Parking Partnership. I get that reasonable assurance is the same as our significant, but who's the alternative source?
Thank you, and I'm sorry to have confused.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I quite like these. I take them as tests that I'm actually reading the stuff.
Your questions are never a concern. Please carry on. That's absolutely fine. So if you look to the box to the right, it's conducted by Colchester Borough Council Internal Audit. So we've taken assurance from another local authority internal audit team.
Right, so that means I should read more carefully. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, if there are no more questions, we're asked to note the progress of the performance against the 2021-2022 internal audit plan. Can I take it that the report has been noted, and please can you indicate by show of hands? Perfect, thank you members. The report has been noted. We'll now proceed to agenda item 8, which is the internal audit charter for 2022-2023. Members, the report is set out on pages 29 to 43 of your agenda, and please again can I invite Angie Mitchell to set out her report.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so the public sector internal audit standards require that an audit charter be put in place defining the purpose, authority and responsibility of the internal audit function, and for the charter to be reviewed periodically and presented to at this council, the Governance and Audit Scrutiny Committee for approval. So the charter establishes the internal audit position within the council, including the Chief Audit Executive's reporting line. So at Braintree District Council, that's the role I hold. Authorisation to access records, to access records, staff and physical properties relevant to the performance of engagements, and it also defines the scope of internal audit activity. The charter, since the last time it was presented to this committee, there's just been a couple of updates, and they relate to change of the role holding the position of the Section 151 officer, obviously to Phil Myers, and updates relating to the non-audit operational activity undertaken by audit staff, and some other minor typographical amendments. Chair, I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Angela. Does any member wish to speak on this item? No, thank you. So, members, we are asked to set out the recommendation on page 29 to approve the updated internal audit charter. Please, can I have a proposer to move this recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Mann. And can I seek a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Eusden. So, thank you. Can I now? They have been moved and seconded by Councillor Mann and Councillor Eusden. All those in favour, please indicate by show of hands. Thank you. That is unanimous and has been approved. So I will now move to agenda item 9, which is our fraud update, which again will be presented by Angie Mitchell, which is set out on page 44 to 65 of our agenda.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so this provides a bit of background on the national fraud arena, what Braintree District Council is doing, and some fraud risks which specifically affect public sector. So the paragraph 3.1.1 on page 44 gives some national background. 3.1.2 makes reference to the government counter-fraud function, which produced a standard setting expectations for the management of counter-fraud, bribery and corruption activity in government departments. So it's not specifically for us as a requirement to follow, but it considers that other public sector organisations such as local authorities may find the standard useful. So it includes an organisational basics checklist there, which are useful in managing the fraud risks in a local authority. Paragraph 3.2 on page 46 gives a summary of the fraud risks affecting the public sector. This list is obviously not exhaustive. There are new frauds arising every day, but you can see there's quite a broad range of potential frauds. Paragraph 3.3 onwards gives some information on the council's fraud arrangements, references to the strategy and the corporate framework for anti-fraud and corruption. Paragraph 3.4 gives details of the corporate fraud investigator and the work that he conducts. 3.4.4 gives a summary of the total overpayments identified through fraud investigation work in 21-22. 3.5 gives a summary of the data matching that's conducted. So not just through the National Fraud Initiative, but Pan-Essex data matching as well. And the Council subscribes to LOCTA for data sharing. 3.6 is very topical, business grants fraud. So we have, as at March 2022, the Council paid out just short of 56 million in grants. And 3.6.2 gives some information on the activities to ensure or to mitigate the risk of undetected fraud in those applications. The very last bullet point on page 49 refers to LOCTA in respect of business grants. Since publication of this report, I've established that LOCTA is used by the Council, but is not used for business grants. However, all of the information which would have been obtained through LOCTA was already obtained through the Spotlight system, and so there's nothing lost by not using that function. Paragraph 3.7 gives some information on corporate policies and procedures, and you have attached to this report an updated anti-money laundering policy and guidance and forms. So we'll come on to that in a moment. Obviously, some of the other policies are on our list for review as well. We've already mentioned some training in respect of Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act this evening. 3.8.1 gives some detail of other corporate training that's been provided in respect of fraud, and the council is getting a new e-learning system which will include a range of modules which will help us in this respect as well. So the anti-money laundering policy has been updated to reflect that the role of the money laundering reporting officer has changed to the head of finance, Phil Myers. And that is obviously presented for your consideration tonight. And Chair, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Angie. Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Chairman. That government checklist on page 45, although it doesn't specifically relate to local government, as you said, but it's considered good practice. I mean, looking down that list, we've got pretty much all that, haven't we? Do you see any gaps anywhere?
Yeah, so we have people who are accountable. We have various policies and strategies. We have protocols for dealing with fraud. We report fraud metrics. We conduct training to improve our resilience. Reporting lines. Yes, yeah, I would say in general terms. Most of those would be ticked off.
Thank you. Second question. There's been an awful lot of national press coverage on fraud connected with the COVID business grants that you mentioned, and I think you said we gave out about 56 million. Have we found any evidence of a fraud within our district or attempted fraud within our district?
So a number of grants will have been stopped before they were paid.
That's a diplomatic answer. Yes. Well, we obviously asked you to.
I don't have specific details of the numbers that were in.
But there have been attempts to.
There will have been applications where the information and evidence supplied did not meet the criteria for providing the payment.
Right. Okay. Thank you. And a similar question for money laundering. It does seem to be a very high priority for the government. I get an awful lot of stuff from the Charities Commission about sort of money laundering for relatively small charities that are sort of an unlikely target, but masses of guidance on it. I mean, have we had within this district any reports of suspected money laundering activities?
So within the district council, I'm not aware of there being any reports. If you look at the policy, the local authorities are not directly covered by the money laundering, terrorist financing and transfer of funds regulations, but CITFA suggests that it's a good thing to comply with. And so we do make sure that we've got a general awareness reporting lines. And
so Phil hasn't had any forms.
We haven't seen any forms
yet, and have that continue.
We just want to be prepared in case.
Yeah. Well, it's good evidence that we're alert to it and have got a mechanism and process. So thanks very much. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. And do we have members? Any other questions? Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Page 49 makes reference to the Pan Essex, this is a mouthful, Pan Essex Compliance and Counter Fraud Scheme. Across the Essex, etc., various councils. Do you find that particularly beneficial? Does it provide a theme, or are you seeing different things in different areas which would match up with what we're looking for, or how is it looked at?
I don't have specifics for you tonight, Councillor Johnson, but the council has been a participant in this for some years now, and my understanding it has been very beneficial.
That wouldn't be extended nationally, just be to our areas. Do you think you'd get more information if it was done nationally, or does that make any difference?
So we do have different types of matching that are national, such as the National Fraud Initiative, which matches data not just from local authorities, but from a number of different organisations and nationwide. So we'd have different types of matching for that. This is, as I understand it, an Essex-based matching facility. I'm not aware if there's any change planned to that.
Okay, members, the recommendations are set out on page 44 of the agenda, and I'll take them one at a time. So the first one is to firstly note the report. So members, could you please indicate that the report has been noted by show of hands? Thank you. The report has been noted. And secondly, to approve the revised anti-money laundering policy. So could I seek a proposer? Oh, thank you, Councillor Mann. And seconder? Councillor Eusden, thank you. So the report has been proposed and seconded. Could I see that members agree with the policy by show of hands? Thank you. That is unanimous, and the policy has been approved. So, members, that concludes our business for this evening, and I will therefore close the meeting of the Governance and Audit Scrutiny Committee at 12 minutes past 8. Via the YouTube channel. Thank you.